he had just put up a video explaining what Hyperloop was, in the best summary of what Hyperloop is that I had seen anywhere. So I was very happy to be interviewed. And then I think it was within hours that you actually had the interview up with a real good background story that I think is very much a message of what we're saying. So I'm glad that you did.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you all for having me here today. And isn't it a coincidence that the final presentation concluding today is on the future generation of this? I mean, granted, we do live in a powder keg of times with so much happening technologically, politically, environmentally. There hasn't been so much contention out in the open like there is today. But ironically, over these last few months, I have never been so optimistic about the future and how we're changing it for the better. And if you're optimistic too, I just want to hear from you and say, I'm all aboard.
I'm all aboard.
There we are. Let's go. Awesome. Now, before we embark, let me introduce myself. As Rick said, my name is Demetrius Villa. I'm born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I am 25 years old. That being said, I'm right in the millennial demographic, which according to Pew Research accounts for Americans born between 1981 and 1996. And of course we can add in Gen Z there, but again, it's depending on who you talk to. I'm the creator of the American Rail Club, which is arguably the nation's #1 online rail advocacy group with over 11,000 subscribers and 1.5 million views on YouTube. With a growing audience dedicated to rail advocacy, it has given me the chance to collaborate with some of the top minds and leaders in the industry, including, of course, Rick Harnish when it comes to Midwest High-Speed Rail, and bringing that vision up to our thousands of viewers to bring that in. And one of the most recent we did was with David Henley, the Northeast Maglev project going on between New York and DC, and that has garnered over now 30,000 views in just a couple of days. Again, thank you for letting me come over here, and thank you for everyone who's presented today to bring this vision out to reality. So, why am I here today? Because I have a story to show, and I know what you're all thinking, not another millennial story. But hear me out, because what I say has to connect with our generation as a whole, and how we think, our frustrations, and why are we so involved with wanting to fix our future. So how did I get involved with trains? Well, on my mother's side of the family, we're all living in Florida, mainly Miami. And my dad grew up in, first in Cuba, and then Queens and Jersey. So his family stayed over there, and we wanted to go ahead and visit the family over in Jersey. There was one little caveat. So my little brother, Darius, you see the cute little guy right there, say off, you think he's cute. So Darius has autism. And after 9/11, he was absolutely terrified of getting onto a plane. Mind you, this was the kid, and he's extremely smart. This was the kid who was playing Microsoft Flight Simulator and can drill down all the specifications every single plane that he saw. So for him to love planes, but not want to get on one, it says a lot. So we wanted to find another way to get up there without taking the plane. So we all came up with the great idea of driving all the way up there, which was fun for a little while. We got to see the countryside and whatnot, but after a while, and after we had the whole vacation and enjoyed everything, it was time to come back home. And nobody was looking forward to driving all the way down 95. So, especially my mother, who scrambled to find another way out and found out about Amtrak's Auto Train, which provided us another opportunity and another option of getting out of the car and seeing the landscape between DC to Orlando. So this is a picture of me and my dad, two young, handsome men right there. And this was the first time I had ridden on the Auto Train. Traveling on Amtrak was this amazing mix of nostalgia, history, and geography. You could sit, sleep, eat, play around, and interact with people without the awkwardness of being stuck to the window seat right next to the engine of a Boeing 737, which is very loud. The train was the portal to travel this great country, and in comfort, in style, without any of the stress of either being on a plane or in the car. Then I started to grow up. Delays started to become more frequent. The time that it took to get from one place to another started to increase, and service started to really lack. and those eyes of wonder started to become weary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the progression of a 5 o'clock shadow right here. So it was around that point of experience when I was 19 that I said something needed to change. At that point, it was already a 32-hour-long journey between Miami and New York. Mind you, back in 1933, this same journey by train took 24 hours. We went backwards. I mean, who thinks about that? It's over 70 years later, we're going backwards. And then the service was delayed even more by 4 hours, so it was 36 in total. The staff was rude, and the failed air conditioning didn't give anyone an easy night in the sleepers. The greatest country in the world, and we couldn't figure out how to make a working passenger rail system. At that point, I was more than upset. And this is how many millennials feel nowadays. So, may you live in interesting times. This is a quote that's attributed to Robert Kennedy. At the time, it was very interesting times, and he attributes this quote to a fortune cookie. We do definitely live in interesting times. And today is certainly interesting because with the technological and demographic shift happening, for example, now millennials constitute more than 1/3 of the labor force in America. We're now the majority of the labor force right now, which means that most of the customers and passengers will fall within this demographic for the next 50 years. And this is another major factor why I left Miami. You see, a lot of millennials now are living in urban environments and they're renting rather than buying homes. And that means we're fleeing an exodus away from places in which the rents are high, like Miami. And I moved over to the Midwest, one, because of the job opportunities that came over here, and because of just trying to see another perspective of the country. Many millennials are moving to the Midwest for a better job market on top of the reasonable living prices. We're also the most diverse generation in America. Upwards of 44% of us belong to a minority group. I myself being one of them, I'm Hispanic of Cuban descent. So you can see what now this demographic shift is happening. We're also very politically polarized and active. I'm sure you haven't met many of us that are very in the middle or not that politically active. We're either pretty far to the left or pretty far to the right. And then who can blame us? We've been through so much through our childhood in witnessing this change in America. We've become penny-pinching extremists, basically. From a young age, from adulthood, we've witnessed 9/11, frequent acts of terror, the longest war in a nation's history, ballooning debt, which we'll all be on the hook for, a global recession, climate change, as well as some good things, like the advent of the internet. And despite all the political differences amongst us millennials, there are some stances we definitely can agree on. For one example, we don't like cars very much. Now, I love cars. I'm a card-carrying member of the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America. But I certainly hate being stuck in traffic. As do most of us. 59% of all millennials would rather spend their time doing something productive, like not being stuck in traffic. We want to choose a place to live. We want it to be on top of an urban area. 80% of us highly consider public transit as an option to get around. So this is a massive factor in planning out future cities and urban planning for the next 50 years. We also want to protect the environment, despite our stance in the political spectrum. I mean, who wouldn't want clean air and water for our kids? With that said, we've had this old/current way of transportation policy that hasn't changed despite who's in charge. Now, I spoke to Gene Skoropowski about this, and he was the former director of the Florida Overland Express and the director of All Aboard Florida, now Virgin Trains USA. And he said this: imagine going up to Congress and saying, we're going to spend $150 billion each year for this national transportation system. But don't worry, we'll be spending billions of more every year on its upkeep, and also it's going to be killing about 40,000 people each year. If you were to say that madness right now to Congress, they would run you out of the room. But yet, this is exactly what we've done. You can see the whole part that we had on the American Train. That's our documentary on YouTube. Now, 40,000 dead each year. That is a tad bit more than the total gun deaths here in America, and actually 3 times more than gun violence. But you don't really hear that much on the news. But it's disturbing to see that that's what we're living with. And then there's another $87 billion, according to the research firm INRIX, which also calculated that we're losing in productivity every year. Just in Chicago alone, the average Chicagoan loses 138 hours of their life to traffic every year. 138 hours they could have been spending with their family, or creating a new business, or learning something new that they wanted to do. That's 6 days every year lost to traffic. It's quite alarming, but across this country, our generation sees most of the grown-ups kicking the can down. Again, it's not all of them, but this is what we see. And even worse, to rack up quick brownie points, we see these half-shot-in, short-term solutions that pretend to be trends, like bus rapid transportation. Multiple studies have gone through this, and the consensus math and data always point to fully thought long-term solutions like rail as the winner. And buses don't work all the time. In some municipalities, they don't even work at all. Bus drivers in Miami, every single day, 25% of them do not report to work. That says a lot, that when even your own employees don't want to show up to your own transportation system. The problem is, when we look back, the situation was never this bad. I mean, we had the world's best passenger rail system. Now, this was a meme I created a couple of years ago, and it went on crazy on Facebook. Over millions of people have seen this. But it goes to show that we've gone backwards in technology design, and then look at Japan, which has arguably the world's best passenger rail network. Now, we've all heard that trains go chug, 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 while everybody else's goes 200 and 300 miles per hour. We've heard this from our president, we've heard this from everyone else. And it goes to show that both sides agree that we need to fix something. They just don't quite exactly agree on how we're supposed to fix it, and it's a daunting issue to tackle. So for the time being, both sides of the aisle have agreed upon this way of fixing things. Now, we have crumbling bridges, waterworks, and roads all over the country, and it doesn't become a major issue until tragically people start to die. So for the rest of us, we're stuck living on this outdated solution. There has to be another option. And this is from the movie Office Space. My girlfriend finally showed it to me, and I've been meaning to see it, but this kind of had my ethos in my last job, and that's why I quit. So we have to increase our responsibility, especially as a generation, as millennials, increase our responsibility as we get older to tackle this solution. Because right now in the audience, I really don't see that many millennials, but we're starting to get there. I think there are, raise your hands if you're a millennial here, come on, raise your hand. There we go, all right. So that's a good amount, that's a very good amount, good, so we're getting there. So we have to grow up and take responsibility so we don't make the same mistakes as the last generation. So you may have heard this as the major reason why politicians and those in power avoid talking about infrastructure.
Infrastructure is not a sexy or glamorous topic.
As much as I'd like to think otherwise, infrastructure is not sexy.
Infrastructure is not very sexy.
So if you can hear that, everybody's saying that infrastructure isn't sexy. It isn't sexy until it is.
Can't this thing go any faster than... Wow.
So back to the story earlier of how I arrived in New York after that horrendous Amtrak trip. I was angry, and rightfully so. I was angry that our system failed my family to get there in an ample amount of time. Later. And I was angry that this system had also failed our country. So I looked up, after I hooked up onto the Wi-Fi once I got to that hotel, I started searching up terms like fastest trains in the world and bullet trains. And then witnessed this documentary on the Japanese Shinkansen system, which amazed me and awed me to see that this incredible system could be created. And I could envision this as a grand solution to fixing our aging network. People needed to know about it. With being able to access information at light speed in this day and age, this has changed the way we have been able to communicate around the world with people. We've been able to collaborate, group up, and share in this movement with both young and old to see solutions that work around the world and in our country and involve ourselves in that implementation. So these are all people, young and old, on the Facebook group of the American Rail Club. This is us going around to different places here in the United States, around the world, and sharing in this movement and in its implementation. And again, whether we're supporting solutions that are in progress here in America or looking at systems abroad, there is no other way that we could have been able to make this possible without the internet. See, the major thing about this generation is that we're a very lost generation, in a sense. Gripped by the shadows of our past that we will never have again, and imagination and obsessiveness with popular culture and ideas of the future. So there's a Welsh term that's very difficult to translate into English, and it's called hireth. I probably messed up that term, but in a sense, this is how you define hireth. It's either a homesickness for a home to which you cannot return, or for a home which you may have never been. An intense form of longing or nostalgia or wistfulness, or the grief for the lost places in your past. Millennials, more than any other generation, are so inundated by these feelings. We look at the past in American history and see the transit system that we used to have. Clean streets. We didn't have this debt tax over us in order to get a regular career. And we could be able to go around wherever we wanted to. We had true freedom. And then we look into our popular culture, and we feel this nostalgia and imagination, and so much of the media nowadays is still based on the 80s. I think we're forever stuck on 80s, 90s nostalgia for the rest of eternity. Then there's the hooray we have for other places when we look around the world. And the world has been having working solutions at this present. I mean, look at this trains. I mean, how can any politician say that infrastructure isn't sexy? Look at those. It's a spaceship. It's going 200 miles an hour. So, and think about this. We'll get you to point A to point B at the speed of a Ferrari, and the only ticket you're going to pay is the one to sit back, relax, and have a martini. Who could have thought about that? I mean, come on. All this time, nobody was really talking about what normal Americans wanted to hear. The solution to our problem. This is where the American Rail Club came into existence in 2014. First started as a club at Florida International University as the High Speed Rail America Club. It's a bit of a mouthful. You can see why I changed the name. We immediately took to Facebook and YouTube with one purpose: bring bullet trains to America. Since then, we've expanded our vision to what we call Triple T, which is Total Transit Transformation, aka make infrastructure sexy again. So here are the founding members of the group, and I'm still in contact with them today. There's all the way on the right, there's Tolga Abora, who's our resident rail fan. And then on the left is Saeed, also a resident rail fan. Founding VP Alex. We have our media guy Sam. Then my little brother Darius, who's the director of research. And then there's me, amateur model. I don't know if they had an actual signing for that, but I signed it. But before starting this group, I tried everything I could to get involved with trying to go to certain different conferences. And there was one group in particular which was very expensive to get into over in Washington, D.C. And as a poor college student, I wasn't going. Oh, right, it's during midterms. Well, do you have a live stream of it? No, I guess not going. So as our demographics are changing, so must the way we engage with that new demographic and how we share information. By 2020, over 70% of internet usage will be video. So that means YouTube and all these video sharing platforms are going to be the kings of where we share this new information. I mean, even LinkedIn is putting on live video streaming onto its platform. So the most important way to reach us and get involved, this is where it goes. And why? It's all about having an active and open platform to learn, share, and communicate. A forum that's on 24/7 with people from all over the world. And we're talking about people from even in the UK, in India, in Japan, in Canada, everywhere from every place imaginable is supporting us to fix our infrastructure. So we are not in this alone. Everybody else supports us. And they're all rooting for us to fix our country's trains. It's incredibly easy how easy it is to connect with people from where you are in your bedroom and talk about solutions. So here's one example. This is Mark Licari from Staten Island, and he's a very avid rail advocate over in New York. And here we are just talking about Amtrak's Available Liberty and back then when Wick Moorman came to helm as the CEO of Amtrak, and all of a sudden we were able to reach over 100,000 people. the result of being online and all this involvement that comes from offline. So it's from taking people online, giving them the information, and sending them offline to go ahead and be involved. So this is where the difference is made. This picture right here that you see was taken in Brevard County. This was during a very contentious commission meeting for the fate of All Aboard Florida, now Virgin Trains USA. There was a heated debate in getting the project over to move forward with, of course, with the approval of bonds that it needed in order to move forward from West Palm Beach to Cocoa over to Orlando. And we were going against a very tough crowd. There was a lot of retirees from the Treasure Coast who were very opposed to this project, but the puppet master behind that was none other than the former chairman and president of American Airlines, Bob Crandall. So there was a lot of airline money being put into this, and we were pretty scared. I mean, it's a bunch of kids versus a business wolf like Bob Crandall. It's a tough thing, but it ended well. The vote to approve All Aboard Florida was close, and it went through by 3-2. This is how close it was. And I'll never forget this. The tiebreaker vote came from a commissioner who came up to me later and said at that point that she wasn't sure about the project until she saw us students and young people getting involved. And she said this: "Your generation is the future, and seeing you fighting for this, it firmly changed my mind. We may not be able to live long to see this come to fruition, but you will, and we're not going to make that mistake of taking that away." It was because of us millennials getting in front of there and involved that Brightline today is rolling down the rails. This is what happens when we finally get involved and get into there. So give it a round of applause for everybody who was involved in this, because this happened. Both Brightline, both millennials, we got it done. And it doesn't just stop right there. Some of us are taking the lead to fix our own cities where we live. Here's a project where I'm working with American Maglev Technology in Georgia, which is hoping to bring an urban maglev to connect Miami Beach over to the mainland of Miami, west, all the way to Florida International University. And it's had on and off support in Dade County, but it seems we may start to get momentum again, but we're getting there. So there's another little thing that's getting a lot of politicians distracted by shiny object syndrome, mainly something called the Hyperloop. And I recently made an in-depth video, as Rick said, of exploring how the Hyperloop isn't really a great solution at all. And close to 300,000 views later, I was featured on CBS 8 in San Diego explaining it to the general public. So we're finally getting out there and sharing the news. So many of you are familiar with this map. And America is special because our founder stated those many years ago, e pluribus unum, out of the many, one. And it really meant that out of the 13 original colonies, there would be one country. Today, America has grown to encompass the span of so many unique and interconnected regions, especially in this great wave of urbanization being imparted by millennials and Generation Z. For a truly connected nation, the vision still needs to remain this, and we can do it. So how does our generation get there? As a young crowd, some of us are not as experienced yet, and we have yet to know about the past, present, and future of our passenger rail in this country. So we're scrambling to find transportation solutions very similar to the advent of the automobile. You had gas-powered vehicles, you had steam-powered vehicles, electric vehicles of every shape and size and color. To quote Henry David Thoreau, he said this: "It's a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things." Speaking of desperate things, it's important we don't fall for these red herrings or experiments that don't solve the issue at hand, which is how do we move the most amount of people in the least amount of time efficiently? That right there cannot do either of those at any stage of its development. And quite honestly, would you trust untested and frankly inferior technology? Because that's what it is. Some of our elected officials are so taken by this shiny object syndrome that whatever will get them press and accolades, they'll go ahead and push it out, and they'll do it. And they'll stick us with a short-term solution to a far larger problem, like this. Now, there's a vocal but uninformed cry now stating that we won't even need trains anymore because, see, there'll be these newfangled things called autonomous vehicles. Now, I love new technology. I love Tesla. In fact, I rented one to come over here, and we even have the key over here. This is the key they give you. It's this little car that you can go ahead and open the car with. It's kind of interesting. The thing is, most Americans cannot afford a self-driving car. And the amount of money that will be pulled over to create that infrastructure will be enormous. And it will just keep us in the same situation again. Now, autonomous vehicles are great. I think they are the future and they will replace cars. However, they will never replace trains. A 5-seat car holding one person going autonomous is still the same thing. You cannot fix induced traffic with everybody in an autonomous vehicle. Speaking of bad ideas, this is something many have agreed to disagree on. I'm sure this made the waves on Twitter everywhere. It's a nice day to have a hat on. Let's talk about good ideas. The options are endless for this generation. As we speak, new technology is being researched and developed that will take transit to the next level. Alstom has a hydrogen-powered train now called Cordia Island, and it's powered by hydrogen. Think about that. Something with the portability of gas and diesel that will be so much cleaner to what we already have, and it will be portable to put it pretty much anywhere. You wouldn't have to do that much in infrastructure. And then, here in the US, we're seeing this revival in streetcars and light rail, which is a great thing. There used to be so many in American cities until certain companies, Garbage Motors, ruined all that. And I think by this time we all know the story. Well, good, because now they're coming back. That's right there. You see there's the Milwaukee hop, which is right now a hop away. So it's a good thing that these things are coming back. And then for regions that are still making or planning to shift from diesel to electricity, there are now hybrid trains, like this one that Hicast developed over for the UK, that can operate on both diesel and electricity. So it's a great way to go ahead and still reduce our carbon output and increase our efficiency. And then I mentioned artificial intelligence and AI. I'm very familiar with it. This is something that I use for my own business and digital marketing. It's an instrumental tool. But AI is by far at its most efficient in transportation in rail. Now, think about this. Rio Tinto very recently operated the heaviest, largest robot in history. They moved over 280,000 tons of iron ore in Australia on a fully autonomous freight train. That is incredible. So, and this goes far beyond PTC. Imagine how much that artificial intelligence will be putting into trains. I mean, we already have this over in Japan, which you can see these little N700 over here, in which they have automatic train control, and this is why they don't crash, is because they have systems already monitoring this. Speaking of, when it comes to automation, it's already been implemented in some urban environments when it comes to maglev. Now, this is a new solution that has come up, and it's becoming a lot cheaper to build. It's being seen to be a lot cheaper to maintain than regular conventional rail. And to be honest, in 50 years, this will probably be a solution that's going to be in use in many cities, not just in Asia, but hopefully here in the West. Now, by that time, our cities will hopefully be enjoying the massive transit-oriented development and the benefits that it brings. For example, Miami, the central station where Brightline, now Virgin Trains USA, is based in, they're gonna have restaurants, shopping centers, offices, rental apartments, and a hotel. It's millennial paradise. Think about this. You wake up in the morning, you go down the escalator, you go down the elevator, go to work, go down another elevator to go to get something to eat, and then go ahead and take the train over to Orlando to enjoy vacation. All without a car. How incredible is that? And we're getting there. We're finally starting to move in the right direction. This is what happens when it all comes together.
This is it. This is it, guys. It's here. Whoa.
I could not hold my elation. This was years in the making. Just imagine the years of advocating, struggle, determination, and the grit. This is the elation I want everybody in this room to feel, because it is worth it when we get the job done. What will transit do for our next generation? Hundreds of thousands of jobs will open up for new industries. And we're talking about in STEM, in business, in hospitality, urban planning, logistics. So many opportunities for so many in this generation, men and women. We've mentioned the increase in transit-oriented development. And there was a recent article comparing San Francisco to Tokyo. and how high-speed rail and transit has made Tokyo, the largest, densest city and most populous city in the world, actually very affordable to live. And compare that to San Francisco, where it's there's stuff on the street. Google and Apple engineers can barely afford to live in garages. This is insane. Why should we even stand for this? There's a solution already. We have to implement it. And it's not just about rent, it's about saving lives. Again, 40,000 people dead every year due to automobile accidents. Billions of cars will be taken off the road, saving hundreds of hours, billions of dollars, and thousands of lives. And of course, giving the options for those who don't want to take the train and enjoy the open road, okay, fine. They can enjoy it in their autonomous vehicle. At that point, I guess everybody will be able to enjoy something out of it. Including the environment. This will be sparking new innovation when it comes to clean energy, wind, solar, nuclear, all re-energizing our economy. And speaking of re-energizing our economy, did you know, according to the World Bank, there was a 10% increase in the Guangdong region of China thanks to high-speed rail. Think about that, 10%. When you put that in perspective of billions of dollars, it is a massive increase to the economy. These are numbers we should be taking to Congress. Hey, would you like to increase the US GDP by 10% by implementing this one simple trick? And it's not even a catchphrase ad or anything like that. This is for real. Then there's tourism, of course, because now everybody moving around is the increase of tourism. Now, Richard Branson's a very smart guy with Virgin Rail Group. He's thinking of going ahead and opening a train station in Disney World when it comes to Brightline. So imagine that. With so many people on the move, it will finally bring a push to fix the rest of our infrastructure. Because it isn't just about trains. It's also our buildings are crumbling. International airports connecting us with the rest of the world need to be remade. Our communications network needs to prepare itself for the next generation. And Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. The generation through transit can power the future. And I know there are some of us that do support this vision, but maybe a little less optimistic. Now take this from freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, another millennial who said this, quote, "Millennials and people, Gen Z and all these folks that will come after us are looking up and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years. If we don't address climate change, the biggest issue is how we're going to pay for it." Now, I may not be that dark about it because you know what? Humanity has survived so much. Out of all the known creatures in the universe, we can take the greatest beating and survive and come out of the most hostile environments. We can go through the deepest of oceans and survive. We can persevere through the bloodiest of wars on the surface. A war where so many young men, like myself and younger, die. And then humanity is the only creature that can go to the blackest of space and plant this nation's flag on another world. Think about that, from the deepest of oceans to the most hostile environments where we're killing ourselves on the surface, to the most darkest and deepest of space. We can be able to go there and survive. We have survived, and we will fix this some way or another. And I want to take it for one of my heroes in history, and someone who was born here in Chicago, who we all know and love, and he said this: "There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, and tomorrow is just a dream away."
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for having me on here, and thank you so much to the Midwest High-Speed Rail Association. This has been a fantastic opportunity, and if you all want to support the American Rail Club, we're on YouTube. Just look it up. It probably already auto-completes itself at this point. Subscribe to the future, and next stop will be the future.
All right.